Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Get Out of Rap. Today I'm with David Harrison, who is Director of Customer at Atlanta Group, and this is episode 88. Hi Dave, how you doing?
Morning, Martin. Yeah, very, very good. Excited to be here with you.
Pardon, say that again.
Excited to be here with you. As you know, we were just saying off air, weren't we? I'm one of the biggest fans of Get Out of Rap, I reckon.
Mate, it's great to hear. Just kind of whether it was doing your patio or down at the gym, and just talking about the community that's evolved. And we were trying to use the podcast to figure out the timeline of when we first started talking, and it was in 2019. I know time's a bit weird at the moment, isn't it? But Dave presented an award-winning nomination at the European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards that absolutely stood out, and I hope we'll touch upon that because we've been talking about doing this episode for a long time. So I'm really pleased you're here.
Yeah, cheers. And the content of that award entry has stayed with me. I know it stayed with the GS where I was formerly. Actually, I'm still in contact with a lot of those folks, and a lot of people that worked for me went on to do bigger jobs in other organizations using the methodology and the thought process behind that, essentially that award entry that got the results that it got. I mean, I'm still trying to do it today with Atlanta, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a winning formula, and I love to share it. I think it makes a difference can make a difference to people's lives if you commit yourself to it.
And I've got that same feeling I had when we were judges listening to this presentation, which was genuine goosebumps, because when you have somebody that says, I've found something, we've put something together that works, it's brilliant, and we want to share it, that's right up my street. I love that, because it's not about competition, it's about collaboration and trying to make people better. More power to you, and we'll go through that for sure. But let's start with your kind of career. Where did it all start for you?
Well, my first job in contact center actually was when I was so I did school. Obviously, I went to college and did A-levels, business and journalism actually, and then I went straight into work in a contact center for Hotpoint and Credo.
Really?
The white goods guys, yeah. I was in their contracts department and then their spares department, and then they let me go. I haven't got rid of this problem a lot. I'm late for a lot of things, and I always had to catch the bus, and the times didn't quite marry up. So when it came to letting some people go, I was first on the list for this guy who just knew me for being late. So they let me go. Yeah, so they let me go is the short story. And then I went to work at Alton Towers. And that was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I worked on Merry England Games, where you have to throw the ball at the bottles and knock them off the pedestal, and that sort of get the ring on the bottle, that sort of stuff. I did those for a season, and it was absolutely incredible. Their mantra was that the people, the colleagues, the staff are there to deliver the magic to the people that are visiting the park. And by and large, all the people visiting the park are there to have a great time themselves with all their families. I was on a stall that basically gave away teddies, and I gave away far too many teddies to people that didn't win, just because I liked them, or we'd talk about something. I'm a big UB40 fan, right? And I remember a guy turned up with UB40 tattooed on his knuckles one day. He left with a raft of teddies. I gave him loads.
Yeah, you're another winner.
Well done. So I did that, but that taught me a lot actually about customer experience. I didn't know it at the time, but customer experience and service delivery, because that's all they keep saying to you: deliver the magic. It wasn't meant to be give teddies away for free, because they're trying to make money as well, but it was a great job, and it was the summer. That was awesome. Strangely, then Hotpoint rang me and asked me back, because the people that I did work with knew I was actually quite good at it. Well, yeah. No, it wasn't. They were happy for me to be late and do a great job. And sort of a Halia name was. She knew that actually, all right, that was a problem, but there was more to it than just that. So I actually ended up going back. I was then redundant from there, and I went to work in an insurance contact center. So early 20s. So
that's quite a lot to happen in those kind of that formative first few years of
that's like a 3-year period. That it's changed quite a bit.
That's a lot to happen, and I think I know, and we'll get onto this. I know you being team centric as well. That kind of empowerment at Alton Towers, trusting people to say we're a company to make memories, deliver magic, but actually it's going to be you that's doing it. I can see that is a thread that's going to be throughout your kind of your career, because you're very much team-centric person, leader.
Yeah. I do think that Alton Towers stuff stayed with me. And when I was head of HR, which we'll come on to in a sec, we ran a program called Deliver the Magic. I actually called it that for our contact center people. That won an award as well, actually, at the time. But that stayed with me. I said to my wife, actually, when I retire, I want to go back and work at Alton Towers. I'm going to go be a litter picker there or something.
Love that. Yeah, I love it.
I'm going to go do it again.
So you went to insurance after that, then, after Hotpoint?
That's when insurance started. Yeah, so I went to work for a local insurance company, Alliance Auto Direct, which was bought for £1 by HSBC within a couple of weeks of me arriving. And HSBC, to be fair, really invested in it, transformed what was it was an organisation that was obviously starting to struggle. They'd got lots of high street shops trying to sell car insurance, and that was in decline already at that stage. This is like late sort of 90s, early 2000s perhaps. And they were centralising into contact centres, closing the branch network, bringing them into contact centres. And they built HSBC in the end built a purpose-built contact centre here in Stoke-on-Trent, near to the Stoke City football stadium. 500-seat contact centre, give or take, big open plan space. And as I say, really invested in it.
What were you doing there?
I was on the phones in customer service. I did customer service. I did sales. Shortly afterwards, though, there was a team leader vacancy, and this happened to me a lot in my career. I'd just be sitting there doing my job, not making any fuss with anybody, really, getting along with people as best as I possibly could. And there's a team leader vacancy, and people would point to me and go, "Oh, Dave would be brilliant at that. Why don't you go for it?" And I'd go, "Me?" I'd be like, "Well, I don't know. I'll give it a shot if you want me to give it a go." And I've always done that. Just tried stuff. Like there's that Richard Branson quote, isn't it? Just say yes, then figure out how to do it later. Yeah. I'm not quite that blasé about it. I've generally tried to say yes to stuff and just take opportunities. So I was the team leader, did that in service and sales as well. Time then moves on. I helped to do recruitment for the contact centres with the HR team. Loved that. Meeting people, showing them around the place, asking the questions, getting to know people, making the decision on who would join. So I applied for the recruitment officer's job, and I didn't get it. They offered me the assistant head of HR job and gave another candidate the recruitment job. So now I'm in human resources.
But isn't that a great lesson for everyone listening? Is that kind of feel that it's that Bren Brown? Is it feel the fear and do it anyway? It's that kind of once you do that, you become addicted, I think, to leaving your comfort zone.
I always say to people, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I used to really worry about what people thought of me. Like I try to read people's minds about what they're thinking about me, and that happened for years and years. And then obviously you get a bit more confidence. You start to realize, like you said, I can't remember if we were recording or not at the time. You sort of, people are really just people.
Yeah.
And that's really it. You don't need to worry.
Isn't it funny though? It's kind of, and we were talking about this quite a lot before hitting record, that one of the things about doing the podcast is you come on and talk about your career, and it's to help people understand when they look at people and they look at their titles and maybe they look at them winning awards and doing great things, that it's just something that they've done effortlessly. It's because of who they are or something that you perceive about them. The reality is very different, and we are all the same. We are all fallible. We've all made mistakes. We've all had, look at the start of your early career, let go, redundant, did a different thing, applied for different things when you maybe didn't even think you should go for it. How long did that feeling last of kind of worrying about what other people might think? Because I think that everyone can kind of relate to that.
Oh, a long time. 10 years, 15 maybe, from that point that we've got to there. Long time. I used to, because I'm actually quite an introvert. I think I'm now more an ambivert. I'm not an extrovert. I'm not truly introverted. I'm definitely sat in the middle. And I definitely, to recharge my batteries isn't to go to a party and socialize with more people. It's to sit down and take some quiet time. But as a result of that, when I was 6 months after being the assistant head of HR, the head of HR left. And the ops director and the managing director went, well, he's a good guy. Let's just get him to do it for a bit. And so then I was the head of HR. And I got no legal qualifications. I got nothing. And I was like, okay. And within 48 hours, I was in Lloyd's in London, chairing a meeting on Tupi because we were buying a business. Now that's one of the most complicated parts of it.
Yeah.
I just had to. The MD said to me, "Look, just fake it. Research it tonight. Get an understanding. The other HR guy will be on the other side of the table. Let him do the talking, and nod, right? And just throw in some of the words that are associated to that bit. We just need to get this deal over the line. So we'll broadly agree what they want. We've got an HR person on the team, winner, right? So I just went and did that, and it went okay.
How were you feeling How were you feeling though when you first went in there?
Oh, I must have been crapping my pants. I can't really remember. I must have been.
Can I just say at this point, Tupi?
Tupi, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've been out of HR for a long time. I'm sure it's definitely still.
No, I was just thinking about you kind of randomly saying relevant words.
Yeah, oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, protection of your rights. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, so it was. So I was then suddenly the head of HR. So then the company got bought, and a real HR director turned up. The best thing she ever said to me was, "Any mistakes we make can be rectified. So don't worry about it." And that just really relaxed me a little bit. I was like, okay, right, let's study this. Obviously, I still want to do a good job, but what Lynn is saying is, don't fret it really, because I just thought employment law sounded sort of super scary. It's not really. Actually, gives you a lot of real good rules that you could follow. In a lot of respects, it's makes it a lot more straightforward. There's a lot of precedent, a lot of case law you can follow. People have been there and done it. So, but yeah, I felt 10 years probably where I was really sort of imposter syndrome, anxious, because I was introverted. I'd always be the last to speak, and my managers would say, "You need to talk more. Get your light from under the bushel." Was a quote in one of my reviews once. You've got loads of amazing things to say and a great contribution to make more contribution. As a result of that, I sat there thinking, right, when do I speak? I need to speak faster. I need to say more. And I'm thinking more about trying to say something than actually something quality to say. But once I got over that anxiety, actually, I'm just really relaxed with the fact that I might not be the biggest contributor to every meeting I go to. Some I will be. If I'm leading the meeting, then that's a different story. But if you're in a big forum, I will probably contribute, well, let's say the least, but I will think to speak, not speak to think, which I think is just a personality trait, isn't it? And if I join a company new, which I haven't done very often, but certainly had new bosses over times and worked a lot in partnerships where you're meeting new people and trying to convince them of your abilities for their own confidence sake and so on and so forth. Might take some time for me to get to know them, but it doesn't take long before they go, actually, we've seen it working now. This is good. And the awards were sort of some validation of that. That's why me and the team I was working with at the time liked to enter awards. It gave us an external benchmark. It gave us validation. And it gave us an opportunity to celebrate with all the people that had contributed to your team point. I used to carry fruit pastels around with me in my pocket, and when I felt that anxiety coming, I'd pop a fruit pastel in. That was my coping mechanism, and I'd eat the fruit pastel, and sugar rush. It would bring me back. I don't need to do all that sort of stuff anymore. But
that's great. I mean, I really resonate with that. I think naturally I was a kind of extrovert with my teams, I'd say. I would clown around and sometimes use that to make my point. But then in meetings where it was either peers and seniors, I would become intimidated. And I think for me, it was more thinking my ideas were relatively simple and about letting the teams know what we were doing, but not flowering it up. But I would build up barriers to not speak, to say, no, this, you're going to sound stupid. You're going to sound simple. And then I would leave the meeting and someone would talk to me, much like you've just said, and say, surely you had a thought on this. And I would explain it to them outside the meeting, and they'd go, why didn't you say that in there? Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's only, like you say, as you go through your career and get validated, feel like you know what you're doing, or that kind of the advice you got from Lynn around, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. I think once you've kind of you freed yourself of those shackles, then it's kind of easier. But that for too many people takes time, so hopefully things like this help people just say it, do it, you'll be fine. And if you're not fine, you'll recover from whatever mistake you make.
Yeah, I think so. I think the skill of the chair is important in those situations. I think in those situations as well, they just keep cracking on through. As I think now we've got a bit more of appreciation of sort of personality types and ways of working for different people. There are ways so when I'm chairing a meeting, I try and be conscious of the different personalities in the room. Those that I know will dominate, those that I know have got great things to say but need to be invited in. And I'll invite them in gently. And if they haven't got a point to make, then take the spotlight back off them quickly. Because otherwise they'll get anxious about, I didn't have a contribution, and that makes it worse. So, it would be, anything, no, fine, that's cool. Validate the fact that there is nothing on this occasion. I think, but again, that's just because I've had that perspective. So that's just personal.
I love it. So I've taken us off on like tangents. So you're still head of HR, but a HR director that's probably got qualifications has come in. Where now?
Oh, Fortis, who became a GS, purchased the company that we became, which was outright. We were a specialist outsource organisation, so we'd won partnerships with people like John Lewis. At the time, it was our biggest partnership, and that's what they acquired us for, that ability to white label and work with partners, and we were growing in that space and getting a good reputation for it. They bought us, and they bought lots of different businesses, and my first meeting was down in Southampton with all the heads of HR from each of the businesses, all super bright, been doing it for a long time. I was just a likely lad, to be honest. And the MD, Andy Lee, rang me after the meeting to go, Dave, how did it go? Almost another, did you get away with it again?
Yeah, they fell for it.
And I was like, yeah, I think they fell for it. But they were brilliant. They were brilliant. I just learned so much from those people. They were welcoming, they were open, they knew we were a smaller business, they got massive budgets compared to us. And some of the things they got to play with, like top quartile reward packages, and we were a minimum wage employer in Stoke. Not to try and taint it, but it was a different kettle of fish. But good all the same. I mean, in the end, we integrated a lot of businesses. And I was one of the last standing heads of HR, to be fair. But I was lucky. I had great leaders. All my best bosses that have really helped to develop me have all been female. In terms of like the diversity piece of. I always like to tell people that the HR director Lynn was brilliant. Caroline King was director of sales and service at GS. She steered the ship on the awards wheel. Talk about absolutely, just first class. My current boss, Karen Hogg, is very, very similar. I've been fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, very same actually, and it's kind of again another reason why I think we're both massive advocates of our industry. I've either worked for or had peers where I've been in the minority as a man, and it's strange when you hear of other industries where it's not like that. And I think that's where I've certainly had to do a lot of learning around being conscious of, are women being interrupted more? Are they speaking as much in meetings? Because my experience, certainly in those first management positions and maybe the first step into senior management, I was in a minority as a man. And some of the most inspirational leaders I've worked for have been women. And I think it is a great thing for our industry. Long may it kind of continue, not without being complacent, but it's great, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it really is. Yeah, no, you're right. Actually, I was in the minority for a long time. I don't really actually put that stamp on it. But yeah, in HR, I mean, typically, lots of it was all lots of the trainers were ladies, and the HR people. Yeah, there weren't many. Generally, I was the only man for a long time. Then we got a head of reward and another HR director. Actually, was there's just 3 of us. All the rest.
And then where from? Did you stay in HR? Where did you go from there?
I did HR for about 10 years. Yeah, so I was head of HR and development for 10 years. Brilliant job. I had responsibility for everything from recruitment to talent management, through to all the learning and development. So from onboarding to management development, all the employee engagement. That was brilliant. We'd put on big award ceremonies, business conferences, all the internal comms for our people fell into that space. So volume recruitment, specialist recruitment, payroll, even employment law, employee engagement, the whole lot. It was ace. And I loved it. And my next job was going to be HR director. That was where my career path was going, until one day when I sat in a boardroom and we got another new MD who said, right, we've lost a contract. And the reason we've lost it is because our bonus scheme was quite aggressive in the contact center. 50+% of it was variable pay against the base. And we'd lost the contract on that basis because in the banking industry, bonuses were becoming tainted. So amongst other reasons, that was one of the pieces of feedback we got. The MD said, I want to trial removing bonuses in the contact center. And I was charged with coming up with the plan. And I went away and I came up with a plan and I presented it back a month later in the boardroom, and everyone was around the table nodding, going, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, brilliant, Dave. Okay, that sounds like a sensible plan. It was a very blue plan. If you get insights, I'd mapped it out. And everyone's nodding, and the MD waited till the very end. He was on the spider phone in the middle, right? So he probably, I don't know whether he could realise everyone was agreeing. Verbally they were, couldn't see him nodding. He went, we're not doing that. That's not happening. That won't work. You've not considered this, and this. And all the things he was talking about was what I now know are the related systems, the things that are connected to bonus schemes that didn't appear in the paper anywhere. So the impact on quality, the impact on performance management. I'd focused on the money aspect and making sure nobody was worse off. But not many of the other related systems. And he gave me a book the next time I saw him. It was Freedom from Command and Control by John Seddon. And I went away and read that book, and it changed the way I thought about everything. Have you ever read that? Have you read that?
No, I haven't. Just say that again. Freedom from
Command and Control.
Yeah.
John Seddon.
Okay, I'm going to get that today.
Fair enough. It's a brilliant book. John Seddon is what's the word? He's evangelical about his method. Now, I've taken lots of his method, but made it appropriate for the organisations I've worked for and pulled in other methodologies. So he can be very black and white. So he can be a bit Marmite, Some people really, really subscribe to the Vanguard method and systems thinking there's no other way. And some are at different places on that sort of scale.
Why did it have such an impact? What is it about it then?
Well, I realised that actually much of what I'd been doing in human resources for 10 years was wrong, but it was the way. So command and control is all the, you've talked about it in your podcast with lots of people, all the measures we've got in contact centres, all the oppression that creates, and it's all productivity and do what you're told, not what you think process of managing people, which is, is very, very popular in this part of the world. That's command and control, like, hit the target. Whereas the opposite of that is systems thinking, purpose-driven organizations and cultures that give intent, really, to help people think and solve the problem for themselves, rather than just go against a metric that often they can't actually control. And then that sort of leads into a cycle of, I can't control it, I'm now missing it, apathy, soul destroying, contact centers equals absence, attrition, worse productivity and stuff. So it sort of brings to life, I mean, you're either subscribing to it or you're not, but it brings to life that can be a bit of a doom loop if you carry on with the command and control. You think you've got control, but have you really? Versus take the shackles off, trust people, give them purpose, autonomy, create mastery. In the long run, if you believe the methodology, your results will be much more profound. And that is what we found. So I was asked to remove the bonuses. I came up with a new plan as a result. We tested it in the John Lewis area because that's very much sort of in line with their culture as well. I know the annual partners bonus piece, but they're very much, aren't they, about customers first, never knowing sold, all that cultural piece was
we're partners,
all that sort of stuff. So it was a good fit. So they were very supportive of it, and we did it. And sales went up, costs went down. No one left for 12 months.
Wow.
People would say to us, "Oh, it's changed my life." They were the words they used, and that, like, I've been in HR with this unknown purpose of, I'm going to help build a brilliant business that gives long-term employment for the people of Stoke-on-Trent. We're going to fill this contact centre with people, and they can come and work here. We're going to pay them well. We're going to create a great atmosphere. But the great atmosphere is hygiene factors, isn't it? Like, we can all run quizzes and all that sort of stuff and have a party.
Here's some sweets.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. You need that.
Yeah.
But that is, you can replicate it. Like the contact center next door could replicate that. So how do you make it different? And I think it's purpose. You have to find out what the purpose is. And people who are joining contact centers like I did from Alton Towers, because I want to serve customers. And again, I didn't understand the psychology of serving people makes you feel good. I want to help people, I want to serve people. So they join to do a service job, and then you tell them to follow a script. Don't serve people, just read this. Like, don't do anything else. Follow the rules. Follow the rules and win a prize. That's what it is. If you follow the rules, you win a prize. Well, you better be sure that those rules and that script are the best way to deliver customer experience. Otherwise, because everyone's following it, otherwise you're scuppered. And how are you going to improve? How are you going to grow? How are you going to find the failure and the waste in those processes? You're probably not, because you're blindly following this strict process.
And how are you? I mean, we've all been there. I can remember as a team leader starting people on the performance path because they'd accumulated or they'd done it so many times, too long in comfort breaks or too late logging back on by minutes. How can somebody deliver great customer experience and be present for a customer, or, like you say, come up with ideas for process improvement if what they're thinking about is, right, I've got 3 more minutes? It's that kind of
I remember a conversation I had with a manager once that said, look, we can't stop telling people about taking too long on comfort breaks because they keep going to the toilet and taking too long. And I was like, okay, so you're going to put a target on this 10 minutes then, right? And that'll work, will it? And that's what they believe would work, command and control. And we just sat down and had a frank conversation and said, look, I think you're trying to solve the wrong problem. If your people are trying to escape the job to spend more time in those toilets, which we know are not a nice place, then there's a bigger problem, isn't there? Why do they want to go and escape over there for what's going on over here? We need to fix what's going on over here, not just because you need to fix the input, not the output. And basically, the way I've always approached change is there's a model I follow, but basically to trial it. I like to not just have this rational conversation where my opinion is better than yours, my process is better than yours, do what I tell you, because that's also command and control. I'm not going to do that. I'd like to test it. Let's prove the theory. Why don't we just have one team? Let's get one team working in this alternative way. So let's just light a little fire. Let's see what happens. Will it burn? Will it grow? And invariably it does. And then when people have seen it with their own eyes, that's when you get the aha moments. That's when you get the buy-in. You don't have to sell it to anybody. And then when that part of the contact centre suddenly buzzing, what happened was all the rest of that contact centre in Stoke, which bear in mind was a 500-seat open plan office, all these people over here are loving life. They're going to the smoking shelter with a big smile on their face. The other guys under the bonus scheme started going, when are you taking my bonus away? But it was the biggest fear in the world for don't touch my bonus. Don't take the bonuses away. No one will sell anything. Biggest fear in the world until you prove the concept and people could see with their own eyes that it was a better way. It was for us anyway.
You've hit the mark as well again about testing. There's not enough testing goes on within contact centers. I mean, I was smiling then because we had a similar sort of thing. Is mine was a little bit more, mine wasn't as well thought out as yours. Mine was I was a bit rebellious and I would just do things. And I think, what is it? Remember that YouTube video of a guy that just is dancing in a certain way?
On his own,
and then other people come along and dance near him. And then it gets bigger and bigger. Same sort of thing in the contact center. All of a sudden, my little team that started small was galvanized and behaving differently. And like we did things, I'll give you an example that ties into, I didn't even know you've educated me today. I wanted to talk to them about lateness, but I didn't want to do it in terms of just hammering them with numbers. I wanted to just explain to them what it meant we all had cost centers. So my cost center, I would try and use that creatively to increase the welfare budget and do more things for the team.
Yeah.
But we worked out, or it was very loose, but I got workforce management to help me work out that for every 5 minutes, I think it equated to 50 pence. And I just did a presentation, a huddle with the team using one of the big plasmas behind me. And I just said, this is not admonishment, but I just want to tell you what this means. And what happened is people started managing their peers, each other, talking about, well, let's see what we can do to be the best team, because we understand more now. And they suddenly had pride in little victories where other teams didn't even know we were in competition with them, but we did. We're going to be the team with the lowest absence and best, because then we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to talk about it. We can focus on doing things for customers and each other. If I'd have known if I'd have been able to talk about it as command and control, then I might have got more buy-in at a senior level quicker.
No, it's really, it was sort of super interesting that those trials were. And the John Lewis one was just so. I mean, it was about 100 FTE that trial, so that was a big one actually.
Yeah.
In Atlanta, we've been trying to do similar things. We probably do have about 100 FTE in similar trials now across our different businesses. I mean, it's different cultures, different. This is a different recipe. It's got different people in it. It's got different challenges. It's in a different place. It's a different moment in time. People are working from home and all sorts of things that have changed since this story I'm telling you now. But effectively, we grew that model and test and learned across all. I think we had 5 contact centers at the time with about 3,500 FTE in them. And by the end of the 2-year sort of program, all the bonuses had gone. All the top frontline targets had gone. Team leaders' roles were redesigned completely. That's an important part of the success criteria. And all frontline QA had gone. All scripts had gone.
Wow. Tell me about the team leaders then, because they're so important in our industry. What happened there?
Yeah, people call it a day in the life of, but we did it in John Seddon's book. He'll talk about what is value work and what is waste work. And essentially we studied team leaders And value work is defined as activity that is either focused on serving customers or improving things for customers. That's it. Everything else is waste. So we categorized in those categories and found that team leaders typically only spent 30% of their time in value work, if you accept that description or definition. So the rest is waste. That's then categorized in 3 pots. Waste 1 is, if I stop this stuff now, nobody will notice, because it's all the stuff we keep giving people that they carry on doing. The report I write, the dish it out to folk. Cheers. 1. Let's get number 2 is stuff that if I stopped, people would notice, but we're not sure we need it anymore. And number 3 is typically in my world, it's like regulatory stuff, like risk management and so on and so forth. So we've agreed that we must do this. And with category 1, obviously you want to stop it. With category 2, you want to figure out, should you stop it or should you move it to category 3? And category 3 is then do it as efficiently as you possibly can. And what happens is, if you just do categories 1 and 2, even just that gave team leaders like 3 or 4 days back. Massive amounts of time. So you flip it to get to like 70, 80% value work. What's happening then is they've got lots of capacity to go and spend it. This is not new to anyone in the contact center world, with your team in the work, doing the call together, not sat 2 yards behind the agent watching what he's doing. You serve the customer together. We'd even plug 2 headsets in and have 2 people talking to the customer. Like, we are here to serve you today. They will do it together. And they're using the continuous improvement methodologies we developed. So is this call a value demand? Do we want it? Does the customer want to be making it? Or is it a failure demand created by a failure to do something, something going wrong, or something not working the way we thought it would work? Like, we gave this information in your new business documents, but 6 months later you can't find it. So that's not really working the way we would like it to work, is it? So how do we redesign that to eradicate the failure demand? Once you start eradicating failure demand, you create even more capacity, because you don't have to worry about AHTs, because you've taken out 30% of your call volume. Now you can take longer on the value calls. We've developed a model for handling value brilliantly. So that's meant sales go up, costs go down because there's less calls, there's less attrition, there's less absent. People are more engaged. And as I say, it's that team leader piece really that was a big conduit to that, because they didn't need the reports anymore to tell them how people were doing, because they were there 80% of the time watching what people were doing. They've seen it with their own eyes, to the previous point. And you just don't need the QA, because I'm with you. I know, and I'll fix it there and then, immediately at the point of sale almost, The second line monitors can monitor to their heart's content. Like, come monitor my team, because I'm with them. These 12 folks are mine, and we are on it. And I know where the problems are, and I know where the problems aren't. And then you start prioritizing your time, and you just grows into a team that are, delivering together for a cause that is not their own. In Ageas, it was making insurance easy. That's what we're here to do. Let's make insurance easy for our customers, and that's how we think about time. Like, is what you're doing now making insurance easy? Yes or no? No. You think about that. Then you're part of the team. You're an adult. You're trusted to be here. If the answer is no, do something about it.
Yeah.
Get back to making insurance easy, if that's what you're supposed to be doing at that point in time. And then it's just the same for processes. Is this process easy for customers or not? And if it's not, well, how do we make it easy then? That was our simple mantra, really.
I love that.
For culture and process.
I love it, because once you've got that purpose, this is like, will it make the boat go faster? Have you read that book?
Well, I've not read it. I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Because that's the same thing. That's how they went from being 8th at one Olympics. It was a British rowing team, 8th in one Olympics, to winning gold in the next, was to cut through all the unnecessary. It's like you're talking about waste 1, right? To cut through all the unnecessary nonsense that surrounds any body of work. They would be able to ask themselves a question: will it make our boat go faster? Yeah. And if the answer was no, well, stop talking about it, or we're not doing it, or it's not important. If the answer was yes, right, everybody, we need to focus on this.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I can just imagine, I was hanging on your every word then. I can just imagine what that, what your center was like.
Yeah, I mean,
I bet it was buzzing.
Well, we had lots. We won Northwest Contact Centre of the Year for the Stoke operation, and we won Southwest Contact Centre of the Year for our Bournemouth operation. The judge, Jane Thomas, who runs those ones, if you know Jane, she runs both of those, but they're separate. But the judges came. She came to both. So the judges in the south were different, the judges in the north were different, and both of them wanted us to win. But Jane was the constant. The best compliment we had was that we'd managed to create the culture we were after in two very different locations, 300 miles apart, 300 miles apart. And she could see the consistency of what we were doing. And that's because by then we had centralized leadership of the contact centers. The sales and service team was led by Caroline King. She had a team of heads of, and we ran the sales and service contact centers. And that sort of 7 or 8 of us were aligned, got over time aligned to that, strategy of embedding up, making everything about creating the conditions for people to make insurance easy. And that's what we did. We set about picking off all the performance management, the QA, all the things that team leaders told us got in the way. And it did. It worked superbly well. Yeah, it's probably 5 years though. It's not an overnight thing. It took us a long time. And then by 2019, we knew we got a good story, and the commercial results were coming through. First contact resolution was up in the 80%. Our NPS across all value journeys was like mid to high 60s. True NPS as well. No tricks in the questions, because we wanted the bad news. We had this philosophy of our voice of the customer program is going to tell us the bad news. It's not to get an NPS to promote on our marketing websites. It's to find out where things are going wrong. So we want the bad news, and then we're going to tackle it. And that's what we did. NPS, net ease was a key measure for us, because obviously making sure it's easy, that was skyrocketing. And we benchmarked it as well, against in insurance and cost bases and complaints per policies in force, things that the FCA hold us accountable for. And we were just moving to market leading on everything. As a result of that, we actually then launched a GS Direct to the market for the first time ever in the UK, which is a GS Easy As. So if you try and get car insurance from a GS now, that's their thing, Easy As. It's because under the hood, that they know their operation is really, really good.
Really. Yeah, I mean, you guys, when you came in and presented, it was one of those kind of wow moments that you had it all absolutely firing, but you could tell that there'd been a hell of a lot of work to get to that point. What a great story. How would you, what would you say to people listening who, obviously they can contact you, but what would you say to people listening about how do you get people and brands working together in this kind of more profound way?
Well, I mean, not to repeat myself, but I do think purpose is the key. The problem I've got with purpose these days is making insurance easy, as we set it 5 years ago. Ease has become a hygiene factor for like all brands, hasn't it? Like, you've got to make it easy and simple for customers to interact with you. We're all at it, aren't we? If it doesn't work within a few seconds, you give up, haven't you?
Yeah, start getting annoyed.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Whatever it is, and so I think, finding the purpose is the one. Finding the purpose is the one. And making sure it's easy work, because we were a partnership business to begin with. We bought lots of other businesses. We've got lots of businesses and brands in Atlanta, but we've just gone through the exercise of harmonizing our purpose and values in Atlanta. And so we were at the very beginning of that journey, and already you can see people are understanding it. They feel like they're part of a bigger organization. They're referring to what we now call ensuring you and yours your way, the pursuit of excellence, and keep it simple. Is the customer bit of a slightly. There's a few other principles under that, but keep it simple is the customer one, which obviously is quite similar to making insurance easy. That is some of my influence, but we did go through the exercise of engaging all of our people in contributing towards what they thought was the right purpose for customers. And I think for today, keep it simple is the right one for us. We listen to our customers to keep it simple, because we're just at the very start of launching what I'd call a real proper voice of the customer program, to get the right metrics and data that we need to give us our baseline to tell us we're really where we are today, and then we can move on from there.
I love that. I love just the idea of, because I think NPS is certainly, there's a lot of people questioning, is this just kind of vanity metrics? Or I love the fact that, so this was in the previous place, but you're doing this now at Atlanta, right? Just kind of, we need to know where we're not delivering for our customers, and these are the methods by which we can do it. That, I think that for me, using customer satisfaction metrics, whatever they are, the right way.
Yeah, I think 100%. Yeah. When I arrived at Atlanta, we got 5 different voice of the customer programs with different providers, asking different questions, only really asking the customers in the journeys where it was going to be good news. So people that had just bought a policy from us, so they're happy with the price, happy with the product. We'd survey them. We get.
How did we do?
Oh, we did well. We shouldn't we? You'll be worried if you weren't doing well on those ones. But no, so that was good. And then, what we've done is we have set our stall out to say, look, the voice of the customer program needs to be consistent across our brands, across our businesses. We've selected one provider to help us do that. The question set and methodology is by and large the same, and we're going to ask all of the customers in the right places where, be prepared for the bad news. But the bad news is the good news.
Yeah, definitely.
For improvement purposes.
Well, it's like sport, and I've got to be careful using sporting analogies, but we use this with the girls' team that I coach. You either win or you learn.
I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, you win or you learn. Sometimes the lessons are harder when you've lost 7-2, but you learn a lot. You learn more for sure, and it's the same with customer feedback.
Yeah, the other big one though, the other big lever we pulled was understanding the difference between value demand and failure demand in contact center demand, whether that be voice or web chat or emails, whatever. Is it a value demand and is it a failure demand? And we test that against the purpose as well. But because a lot of people think or did think that a failure demand was a value demand. For example, I've done a quote on your website and I'd like to buy it, please. So we take the call, we double check the information, we book it on, so we sell it, and then we pay that guy a bonus. What I got them to do was say, so this is 5 years ago, but why did that customer not complete the journey they started? So ask that customer what stopped them from. We no problem serving this and doing this for you now, but let's get some more insight. Why did you not do it? And people would start to say to us, I didn't understand that question, or on one brand, I couldn't find the buy button. Right, so we asked more customers, and lots of people started to say, I couldn't find the buy button. So we moved the buy button up, and those calls disappeared. People could, and the straight through rate increased. We weren't utilizing the people were following a process, a script. We educated them in value demand and failure demand, and they started to give us insight. So you can do it through manually collecting the reason why customers called on an Excel spreadsheet. I've done that before. And then masses of hundreds of Post-it notes are going up on the wall, categorizing these value demand and failure demand themes, or things like, speech analytics these days can often give you that insight. But that is telling. I mean, I've been to brands where there's 70% failure demand. Typically, it's about 40 when you start, in my experience. And I've done this across lots of partnerships and lots of contact centers, and it's all got failure demand in it.
That's because people are just stuck in the activity without being able to kind of question, and you've given them the framework to do that now.
Well, yeah, so they're stuck in the activity, and they're measuring the wrong thing. So they're measuring the number of calls I got, the number of calls I've answered, and how quickly I answered them. That's a decent measure, but what's the mix of those calls is the next layer. How many of those were calls we wanted? How many calls we didn't want? You've got 2 options. You could either focus on people to go faster, or recruit more people at increased cost to improve the answer rate if it's not where it needs to be, or design out the calls. So take the failure demand out. When you take the failure demand out, it heals lots of your problems. Customer satisfaction goes up, people aren't dealing with the complaints, so employee engagement goes up, cost goes down. So it's like simple. It sounds simple. It is a bit harder to do in practice, because then you need all the mechanisms for making change, which can become a bit overcomplicated as well. But that's probably another story.
Well, I already feel like we're going to be doing another couple of these, because we've kind of just stayed on your career, but it's been absolutely fascinating. Where do you think the future is? When you look at where you are now, but also in a wider sense, the contact center industry, given what we've gone through over the last couple of years, what do we still have to do, and where do you think we're going?
Well, where do I think we're going is the more difficult of the two questions. I think what we have to do is, and I'm biased, I think we're going to be less location specific, aren't we, in the contact center industry? I think that like recruitment pool is just widening. I don't think it's quite got there yet, has it? There are some people that are doing it really well, and you can tap into people like Sensei, can't you, if you want a good sort of home working network. But I do think that people will start to go, hold on a minute, so I'm in Stoke and we're struggling for a recruitment pool here. What about Leeds or Newcastle or the other places that have got great contact center people and reputations, and they could work for us, because we'll do it like this. And I do think that will grow and grow even more than it has now. We've sort of got over the trust of people being able to do this from home, and all the customer problems that we perhaps thought around taking payments have all been overcome now, haven't they? Because they were all restrictions in the past. All gone, haven't they? I think technology is going to keep taking us forward. Customer wise, it's going to be more about digital tech, self-service still, and then that only leaves voice demand to be around. And Martin Hill Wilson will like this, emotive, complex demands, and that means we're going to have a skill gap. Because if people are just following a process and a script and they don't have to think, that's all right for frequent, predictable demands. When things are going wrong and we need some empathy, and we need to have a more personable conversation, that is another. And you need time to be able to have that conversation, whether it be vulnerable customers or whatever is arising. That's a different skill. And I don't think we have that en masse. I think Martin said on your podcast, you could spot the guy who's got great empathy over there in the corner. He always does really well on those calls, and everyone else is just smashing through them. We've got more of the people that are smashing through them than the guy in the corner that's delivering a great empathetic service. And we actually want him to go a bit faster at the moment because we've still got a lot of failure demand, but we need to answer them all. So all these things are all linked, aren't they? That's the related systems. So Ant was telling me about, you haven't taken into account the entire system. You've just looked at bonuses, and that's just one component. And when you play Jenga, take a part out, it could collapse. Whenever you take something out, you've got to put something else back in. It's not just a case of just changing everything. You've got to consider all the related impacts. I think empathy in customer experience, customer service is probably going to dial up for voice people and contact centers.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And to your point, I think we need to be thinking about how we can ensure that that's a skill that is that the many are trained to have, or that we facilitate or tease out of people. Because at the moment, like you say, they're the kind of, in a concreted landscape, they're the one bit of greenery that you see that's managed to kind of stick out. How do you, if the processes and everything are about, if your main focus is productivity, and that's how you measure success, and now and again there's somebody although saying that, there's a lot of great activity out there around. I've been really pleased to see companies reaching out to specialized charity providers around dealing with very specific vulnerable customers, and because charities want to come in and say, because it's going to make life better for the people that then invariably use the charity. And that's been great to see. Really creative kind of
that is very true, because the pandemic obviously has propelled a lot of that as well, hasn't it? Not on its own. And when obviously we are talking very generally, I can also think some great examples of where there is awesome empathetic service delivered as standard now in places. So we're talking generally, aren't we? As contact centres on large. I just think self-service will continue to go up. So frequent, predictable demands that anyone can do ought to be able to. If you want to self-serve yourself, you should be able to self-serve yourself these days. But if you need to speak to somebody because all the money out of your bank account just suddenly disappeared, you probably don't want to self-serve yourself. You probably want to quickly speak to somebody who can help.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That's it.
Yeah, I think you, Dave, you've been fascinating, and we definitely have to. I get criticised about this, because I say it but I really, really have to. We've just got. We'll stop recording in a sec, but we'll diarise up another session because we haven't even really scratched the surface, I think, of what everything you bring. But it's been fascinating. What would you say to people that are listening that are maybe, I think your career and how eloquently you speak about the things that are important. You're a multiple award winner, so you're a real role model. But what would you say to that kind of introvert that might be sat there in the contact center right now? What tools would you suggest people use, or what advice would you give?
I saw a poster in those early years that had it was one of those cheesy posters. Like one of them was I remember it really well. One of them was a picture of a snowflake, and it said, "Imagine what we could do if we stick together." Was one, right? I remember that one. But the one that really stuck with me was another one. And the phrase was, "Autograph your work with quality." Right, and that's the one that stuck with me. So whenever I've done any piece of work from that point on, 25 years ago, I've always tried to make it the best piece of work that I possibly can do in the constraints. So I wouldn't miss a deadline for it, but I'd always give everything 100%. So as a result, I just back myself really. I think it's just do it, trust yourself, learn. I spent years where between 8 and 9 every day, I'd read something or watch a TED talk or listen to a podcast, just constantly learning. It was like that imposter syndrome was actually a positive for me because I was so scared about people catching me out. I actually needed to know more. So I probably kept going past the point of need, and as a result of that, ended up further forward than perhaps I really needed to be. And I just kept going. I just kept going. That sounds like really rubbish advice.
No, honestly, more power to you, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure there's going to be, in the same way that you said you've reached out to people that have come on, people. I know you're open to people reaching out to you, getting in contact with you. Definitely come back on, and we can go through some of the other things that we've been talking about off record, including what's the name of that cake from Stoke? You're very passionate about cake. Stoke, aren't you?
Oh yeah, it is cake, oat cake. Yeah, an oat cake. I'm going to send you some oat cakes, some Staffordshire oat cakes, and you could cook them with some bacon, cheese, eggs, tomatoes, beans, mushrooms. Oh,
love it.
I might have that for my lunch today now.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, I've loved it, mate. Yeah, brilliant. So that's one of my bucket list things ticked because, as I say, from the beginning of the podcast, wanted to a bit of support since the beginning. Wanted to come and talk to you again. So thanks, Martin.
Well, I've been designing some new merch, so I'm going to send you some of that as well. See what you think.
Oh, cheers, nice one. I am on your website sometimes. It's on my Christmas list. Put it on my wife's Christmas list. Get me a Get Out of Rap t-shirt.
Thank you very much, mate.
Okay, mate, nice one. Take care.